Moscow subway system, one of the most spacious in the world, became a shelter for hundreds of thousands of ordinary Muscovites. At the Kirov station, deep below ground, the Russian General Staff set up its new offices, working on while the battle continued in the night sky. In the first month of their raids on Moscow, the Nazis lost 200 of their bomber pilots. While below, the children grew accustomed to this new way of life and made a game of it. Bombing did not seriously interrupt Moscow's industries. Most of the capital's plants had already switched to armaments. Despite the heavier raids of August and September, their output increased. They rushed it straight to the front. Occasionally there was heavy damage by fire as well as by high explosives. The attack was indiscriminate. It even damaged the embassies of Germany's allies, Italy and Japan. More and more often, the Soviet fighters scrambled and the siren sounded. Moscow's landmarks began to suffer. Moscow University, the famous Vakhtangov Theater, the Prague restaurant, and even the Kremlin suffered minimal damage from a bomb. And it gave Moscow's children a new hobby, collecting souvenirs, bomb fragments made in Germany. As far as possible, the Muscovites lived their lives as usual. From time to time, they woke to find fresh evidence of the night's activities. Each morning, they stood in line for news from the front. It was not encouraging. The Nazis were very far from being contained. In the middle of September, the Fuhrer decided to intervene in person. At the German field headquarters, he unveiled his new plan. Moscow must be surrounded in such a way that not a man, woman, or child could escape. Then the city was to be flooded. Hitler ordered a huge sea must conceal the Russian capital from the civilized world. Hitler christened it Operation Typhoon. Along a front of 150 miles, Operation Typhoon committed 74 divisions, 14 of them panzers and 8 motorized, 1,800,000 men, 1,700 tanks, over 14,000 guns and mortars, and nearly 1,400 aircraft. To face them, the Red Army had 800,000 men, with 7,600 guns, 990 tanks, and 670 planes. On September 30th, Hitler declared, "After 3.5 months of fighting, you have created the necessary conditions to strike the last vigorous blows which should break the enemy on the threshold of winter." And once more, the Wehrmacht lumbered dangerously eastwards toward Moscow. 3 days after the start of their attack, the Nazis claimed a breakthrough in the center. On the 4th day, they took Orel without pausing. They had pinned down major Soviet forces in one pocket near Vyazma and another near Bryansk. Goebbels announced, "The annihilation of this army group has definitely brought the war to a close." The encircled Soviet divisions fought on. Their fierce resistance slowed the Nazi pincers and allowed the Soviet High Command to make a fighting withdrawal of the rest of its troops. North and south, however, the Nazis were still grinding towards Moscow. It was the hour of decision. Early in October, Stalin summoned General Zhukov to Moscow from his Leningrad command, intending to place him in command of the Western Front protecting Moscow. That front was beginning to crumble away. Zhukov recalls those days.
7 числа я вылетел в Москву. В Москву прилетел уже вечером и сразу же направился.
I arrived in Moscow on the evening of October 7th and immediately went to Stalin's apartment in the Kremlin. He had the flu, but he was working.
Поздоровавшись, кивком головы, он предложил посмотреть на карту и сказал: вот смотрите, какая сложилась обстановка на западном направлении.
He greeted me with a nod and pointed to the map in front of him. Look at the front, he said. I can't get an exact report on what's happening, where the enemy is, where our troops are.
Если вы можете, поезжайте немедленно в штаб Западного фронта.
If you can, go straight to Western Front headquarters and study the situation there. Call me anytime, day or night. I'll be waiting.
В западном направлении сложилась крайне опасная обстановка.
The situation on the Western Front was very dangerous. Practically all the roads to Moscow were open.
It was the most critical moment of the entire war, and Moscow was preparing for the worst. The diplomatic corps had left, and so had many of the government officers. Stalin and the Stavka stayed. Whole factories were now moved to the east by train. Zhukov left Moscow at once to assess the situation at the front. New defense lines were formed in the area of Mozhaisk. Stalin appointed Zhukov to command on October 10th. The mood in Moscow was somber. People were listening to news of the heavy losses at Vyazma and Bryansk. With the Nazis only 40 miles away, the Muscovites could hear the distant thunder of the battle line. Stalin proclaimed a state of siege. The Moscow Communist Party called on everyone to defend the city. $600,000 Muscovites, old and young together, turned out to strengthen the city's defenses. Most of Moscow's manpower volunteered for the workers' battalions. The new infantry, hastily trained, was to march out at once against the Nazi veterans.